Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me on another of my interviews. Today I'm talking to a gentleman who is a problem solver. We know that we have problems coming down the line at us rather rapidly, and we don't always know what we need to do and how to solve it. This gentleman has written a book, a free book, and it's going to be available to you if you would like to have a read. His name is Freeman Chance, and he's in Pakistan on a hillside farm. Freeman, it's very lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, you're an Englishman on a Pakistani farm. How does that work? How long have you been over there, and what are you doing there?
I'm doing circular farming or experimental farming, if you like, and I've been here a couple of years. Essentially, you know, the idea of waste is a human concept. It doesn't really exist in nature. Everything just gets reused.
Right,
So,
waste. Yeah.
yeah, funnily enough, the biblical punishment for Adam and Eve for eating the apple was to toil in the fields. And that's what we've been doing. We've been toiling away, with tractors and trying to get only one crop to grow and get rid of all the pests that try to, take over our one crop and making all these silly, obvious mistakes that nature, if we looked at it, is just saying, don't do that. And so if you work with nature, you create your own little ecosystem. So we take in, for example, fruit from the fruit market, rotten fruit, and we feed it to flies or to larvae of black soldier flies. And then their poo is very good for plants. It's like a natural fertilizer. And then the larvae themselves can feed chickens and they can feed reptiles and fish. They can even feed humans. If you're, I'm not one of these Bill Gates people saying, "Oh yes, we've got to eat
Eat
insects."
bugs.
Well, if there's nothing else to eat,
Yeah.
I'd fry them up. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they say that in prison people eat cockroaches in certain places. So, if you're really hungry, you will. They can be used for lots of stuff. Plus, the oil, they have this really powerful oil that's very good for your skin. So we might make a beauty product, a soap or something to help with keeping your skin young.
Wow. That sounds interesting. Sounds delightful. And of course, circular farming. I mean, that's if we go back pre 1940s and a little bit before. That's effectively the small farms in Britain were pretty much doing that in the old days, of keeping as much of the product, the muck, back onto the land in
Mm.
subsistence farming. And it's, as you say,
Well,
it's only in. Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, my grandmother told me they used to come and collect the human poo and just stick it straight on the fields.
Yeah, why not? What?
So yeah, just compost it direct, and it seemed to work fine. Of course, then food had a lot more mineral content and it was a lot more healthy.
Yes, not sure that
I
the
wonder.
the content of today's detritus that people are getting shot of is necessarily full of anything, especially if they've been eating
Well,
a lot of
hormones.
processed foods. Yeah, hormones
Yeah,
and
it's probably full of hormones and chemicals. Yeah,
yeah,
and
which
poison, poor things. Yeah.
yeah, and you don't really want that going back into the food system because there's enough of it as there is. So we
Yeah,
know
yeah.
we're in a dodgy situation. There's so many things coming down the line with the many of the things I've been talking about, the sort of digital IDs, the net zero nonsense, the sort of idea to get us into 15-minute cities, the central bank with all the credit scores put against us, and then the fake UFOs are going to be coming soon, and over here, I don't know if you're having whether this is a global thing, but we're having our phones pinged by the government now on the 23rd, on the St George's Day, to test out the emergency procedures. So we're sort of being slowly boiled like the frog, being told all this
Mm.
stuff that there's something coming. They're not directly saying it, but we know something is. And part of that, of course, will be food shortages. And we've seen
Yes.
the evidence of that. So tell me what you think about these food shortages and why we should be concerned.
Well, it is planned for that to happen, and there's lots of different evidence of that. These strange phenomenon of all these food plants burning up in America. Planes crashing into them, all kinds of stuff. And then you've got these trains derailing in agricultural areas and poisoning the water supply. So in California, they're cutting off the water. So just basically, they're just going to stop people in Holland. They're stopping farmers from. They're saying, well, we want your farm, make a big EU city. So that's all part of this plan to destroy the food supply. And I think that's probably why they're going after Russia and China right now, because they're not on board. And if they don't come on board, then they only get to do it in the West. And that's a big problem for them. So they need the globe, they need the whole thing, because otherwise the BRICS is a big problem for the CBDCs, because if there's another alternative financial system, anybody that doesn't want to have their money controlled will work out a way to do that.
Mm. Yeah,
To use,
and
to
I'm
use that
hoping people
system.
will.
Well, they will, and I remember the Brixton pound,
Yes.
which was it's not money, it's a token or something like that. It's like a license or a token. It's some legal thing, but you can use it and exchange it for just as money, and people did that, and that kept money in Brixton. And when you go into Tesco, that money sort of zooms off into a bank account in Switzerland and never gets back to the community again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we had one in Lewis, which is just down the road from where I am. The Lewis had their own
Yeah,
pound, and
I
Swindon
love Lewis.
also had theirs for a while, about 20 or 30 years ago. I was
And yeah,
yeah, I was down there when they were in use, and I remember everybody talking about it. But like so many of these things, I suppose because fiat currency was just the national thing, it wasn't so important. But we've tested it, we know it works, and there will be alternative currencies, even if it is only locally based, for those that really, if there's enough independent shops, I suppose that's part of the thing. If you've got enough independent shops and they can still have purchasing power to get whatever they need,
yeah.
it's going to be a trying time. What sort of time scale do you think that these food shortages are likely to come to the West?
Well, it's hard to predict, isn't it? Because I think they keep adapting their plans depending on what's happening. So that they'll get something ready, and then like the thing with the Trump arrest, they were going to arrest him, and then they changed their mind because they needed that distraction to be delayed a bit, and so they keep changing their plans. But
Mm,
if you think if they're hitting the food supplies and the water supplies now, you're talking about next year's food supply,
right.
and you
Yeah.
might have a global backlog of food that might last another year, in all the silos and stuff. Like in Germany, they have big silos full of wheat and stuff just in case. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, we don't have that in the UK. But
And
so it's going to take to really kick in a global issue would probably take a couple of years. But if some other event kicks off that stops the supply chain, it could happen very quickly.
yes, and there's a sort of hint that something's happening in May. I have no idea exactly what's happening, but we know that they're shipping cargoes of some bird flu medicine, and it's in very large quantity in crates around
Mm.
major cities in the West. So you're sort of getting a hint that they're taking massive precautions, shall we say, in order to
Mm.
get round the YouTube's terms and conditions and not let the channel disappear. Massive precautions in case something like that should happen.
That,
And
that that could possibly be another attack on the food supply. You know what I mean? So,
well, absolutely, you
but
wouldn't have
also another
eggs and
another
things.
lockdown pandemics type scenario.
Mm, absolutely, yeah. So you've thought about this and you've written a book, which I've got. Let me just flick that up onto the screen if I can find my mouse here. I found the mouse. It's, as my girlfriend says, it's not the mouse you're looking for; it's the cursor. Yeah, thanks. So here is the book that you've got, and it says it's called "Plan for Plenty: Food Abundance in a Crisis," and that almost sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? If you've got food shortages and you're in a crisis, how is it possible to have plenty of food, survive and thrive when the shelves are empty with your unique plan for plenty? By F.A. Chance. So tell us about the book and about the sort of thing we can find in it, and how do we get to that point where we've got plenty? I mean, presumably a lot of it is to do with prepping.
Well, that's only going to last so long.
Right.
You know, you can prep to high heaven, but sooner or later you're going to have to get food from somewhere. If
Yes.
there's a prolonged shortage, okay, if there's a storm and and you're out for a week, you might get by with prepping, or a month, or even some people have food for a year put aside. But if you look healthy after 6 months, people come to your house and take your food. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't want to look healthy. You don't, so makeup
No,
skills might be
you
required.
actually have to dress down and look scruffy and look hungry.
Mm.
I mean, people get desperate. Food is survival. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
No food, and people got kids, they've got mothers, and they've got brothers, and they're going to do anything to feed them.
This is
So
very.
if it
I
gets
mean,
like,
this is very, very scary. I mean, people listening to this, they on the one hand, they may say, "Oh, it will never happen." On the other hand, some people may overly think this and think, "Oh my God, this is the end."
mm. Well, in Venezuela, I mean, they've got the biggest oil reserves in the world, but they had this kind of scenario, the sort of thing where they'll you'll be driving along and somebody be lying in the street, and you pull up, and then a bunch of people come and attack you and rob you and take all your stuff in your car. And it gets like that when people are desperate. They'll do whatever it takes, and the darker side of society will emerge. There's that, the gangs and all of that. They'll last longer than the average people because they'll be able to get supplies for longer.
Yeah.
And cities are much more dangerous to live in than the countryside. So, I mean, if a real big situation goes down, try and get out of cities because you're competing with lots of people for very few resources. Shop food will run out in a few days.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, it's quite. I'm just sitting here when my stomach is already feeling, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because we're not used to this sort of thing. Most people are not used to surviving. And the last pandemic taught us that we can just use our phone to get somebody on a bike to deliver us a cup of coffee. Not that I
Mm.
personally did that, but we've become so dependent and so reliant on either the state, the supermarkets, and all the services to provide us with food that some people will just, they'll be lost, won't they?
I fear for those people. I fear for the people that just have no idea about anything. They say that kids in London don't know where eggs come from. They don't know they come from chickens. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Those parents that are raising those kids have got no idea. So I worry for those people. I think it's the only way for those people to survive is through the leadership of others who got a clue what's going on. You know what I mean? So organizing, that's why it's important now to start making your connections and decide who you're going to work with if it gets weird. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Now, just make a big point that the plan for plenty is there's 100 million books on prepping, and they're probably better than mine. You know what I mean? And mine's just a bunch of links, really, and just sort of brief paragraphs on what you need to do in each scenario, and links to people that know more than I do. But most people never do anything about the books they read. They just read it and they go, "Oh yeah, that's good," and then they move on to another book. And, oh, that was good. So I give away with the free book a free planner, which is just basically all the headings from the book, and you go through and you go, "Oh, security. Well, what would happen if somebody wanted to try and get into my house? How would I stop them?" And then you go to the next one, toilet. So there's no water. How am I going to deal with that? You go through all the points and you make a plan. You just make even a tiny little plan for each topic, and then at least when the shit does hit the fan, you can go, "Oh well, okay, we need to get water. We need to do this. We need to." You've got already something in your head, and that
mm.
already puts you ahead of everyone else. Instead of panicking, going, "Oh, what am I going to do? I've got no idea what am I going to do." You'll go, "Okay, I know what I have to do. I wish I'd done more, but at least I know what I have to do now." So the idea is that you get together with whoever you're working with, and you make out this plan, or you separately do it and you discuss it later on. And you can start growing food in your windowsill right now. You can have strawberries in a bottle. You know what I mean? Or
Mm.
there's so many little things you can do.
Thing is, if you grow strawberries in your windowsill, and somebody else sees your strawberries growing in your windowsill, you won't have strawberries on
So
your
you
windowsill.
don't do it. Yeah. No, I'm saying now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
When it
Yeah.
comes
No.
to that, there is a whole sort of section on how to disguise your food and how to look like you're not growing your garden's all ramshackle and there's nothing there, but really there's potatoes everywhere and stuff hidden away.
Yeah.
You want to create this impression that there's nothing. There's nothing there, and deception is one of these human traits that keeps us alive. So if you've got a window that looks broken and the swing in the front yard is on its side, people are less likely to go and look there than they are somewhere that's all neat and tidy, where there
Yeah,
might be some stored food, some tins or something.
because people don't want to waste their time and energy, particularly if they're hungry. They want to be able to actually, think that that's the most likely place. Whereas that place, I could be in there an hour, and it would be a waste of
Yeah,
time. But it might not be, of course, if you're clever.
exactly. You've got to use the seat. You've got to dress down and look like you're scruffy and you're searching. You need money and you need food, and so no one will bother you because it's
Mm,
another one of us. So if you need to go out and get water, say, you've got to you can't just go out in your nice Nikes and forget that. I mean, no one will care about your Nikes, but they'll say, well, he looks healthy, or she
yeah,
looks like
yeah.
she's got a supply of food. We'll follow them. We'll see where they go. This is what people do when there's a very devious side to humanity, and to survive, people will start reverting to those things unless we organize and we work in communities and come together. But even then, there'll be outsiders coming and trying to want a piece of that, and who won't want to join in. So
There was a television program. I don't know if you remember it. In the 1970s, called Survivor, and it was about a virus that came round. And I remember it went on for numerous episodes. And in the end,
mm,
they were in a camp. They built their own camp, and they were out there with their guns. And it was sort of like the wild. I mean, it was an English thing, but it was like the Wild West. People would approach and, what do you want? Keep away. And there was the chain link fence. I remember that, and dogs, and people were on the inside.
yeah,
There was a lot of. It was. I mean, it was drama, of course, but it was quite scary. I mean, I was young when I watched it, and you sort of go, blimey, that would never happen. But at the same time, it was chilling. And here we are on the brink of something like that about to happen. And of course, some people, as I said earlier, will think, no, this isn't likely, and other people will be very much switched on. And some people will be just like this, crossing their fingers because they know they'll be useless in this situation. Um,
well,
uh,
that's why you could read the book, and and you can think, well, okay, then I can go to Auntie, whoever
yeah,
in some other place that's a bit smaller, or if you know someone in the family that's in a rural area, and you can contact them and say, look, if things go really crap, can we come down there? We can help you. We'll bring food. We'll bring people. You won't be able to survive on your own. You'll
mm,
need, so you can start making those connections now, just in case. You know what I mean? And nobody wants to bring it up. Everyone wants to avoid the thing. Oh, I don't really know. So take it seriously. At least have that little plan, even if you just do it on your own and your wife doesn't know or your husband doesn't know. Just make out the little plan, and just so you've got some sort of preparation. We hope it doesn't get really bad. And I do
mm.
think there's a counter plan. I don't think it's all the bad guys having their own way, WF and all. There are other my sort of shamanic training, if you like, that I've done, gives me a sense of what's going on in the world. And there isn't, it's evil is on, it's not on top. It's desperate. There's good forces coming up, and that's why it's desperately trying to sort of say, oh, no, I'm going to be on top. So we're winning, but obviously they're going to follow through their plans and try and do what they want to do, and that's the game. I think this is either a simulation or it's some sort of a experimental game. But your sole journey is to try and triumph, or to be the bad guy or whatever it is, and just and live out that existence. And somewhere someone's gathering the data and going, oh, that's interesting. So
What do you think the government response will be? I mean, there'll be people will naturally be looking to the government, the police, the army, obviously the NHS and people like that who will be certainly initially trying to help food shelters and all of that. Um, do you think that
I
will?
think they'll use the planned incompetence model like they did with COVID, where it looks like they just don't know what they're doing and they're making mistakes, but actually underneath it's all planned out. They wanted the old people to die, wanted that all those things were meant to happen. It wasn't an accident, And you can tell because, certain places like New York where they just really went for it and they forced them into the homes and, they knew what was going on. But here it was. I mean, here, so UK, I still think as if I'm in the UK sometimes. It's the same thing, it's planned, and I think they'll use that same model of pretending to be incompetent and saying, well, we're going to get food from Russia or wherever it is, and but it will be planned. They've got already way planned years ago. They planned how they're going to do this, and it will be a situation where you have to do what the government tells you, or you can't eat. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Never mind take a vaccine, you won't have any food unless you do what you're told. So that's the situation they want, isn't it? Where they can coerce you, they can control your money, control your food, water, housing, travel, and you just have to do what you're told. You know why they want to do that is the key is what we really have to ask ourselves, isn't it? Why do they need to have that situation? You know what I mean? What's behind that? Anyway, that's a bit probably philosophical for the topic. But they hopefully, I don't think it's going to get as bad as they want it to. I think that other people have other plans, and in a way, they're letting. I get the sense that they're letting these guys to wake humanity up. Someone is letting these guys play it out, but kind of managing it.
Right. I mean, I
That's
do get. Do you
that's
get
how.
the feeling? Do you get the feeling that since the pandemic, more people are waking up? That the internet actually has been it's been a double-edged sword, and whilst it's been a way to try and get messages out, but it's also been a better way for those people who are curious to go and find out other information. So whether they've come to platforms like mine, but ones that are a little bit more knowledge based, and mine's sort of asking questions, but people who've actually got sensible ideas about what's going on. So do you think people are waking up
I think
as a
there's got
result
I
of
can
the
go a
pandemic?
little bit deep on this, and that is that I think that in 2012 there was a shift of energetic course of the planet, and after that point, it's very hard to pull off this deceit, lies type stuff. Everything will get revealed. Big heavy lies will get outed, and it's no longer possible to do the kind of covert, manipulations that they were doing without people knowing. And
Mm.
once people know, they can't go back to sleep, can they? Once
No.
the cat's out of the bag, you're not getting it back in. So once a cat has experienced the inside of a sack, it will fight for its life not to have that experience again. And we're just the same. So I think yeah, they're on very, very thin ice, aren't they? You know what I mean? Because they're pushing harder and harder, and I think they're trying to keep us all sort of off balance and confused. And they're going to throw shock and awe. There's going to be probably the internet will go off for a while, or the banks will all close, and all kinds of stuff will happen. And nobody, because everyone will be off balance, they won't be able to react.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah. No, I get that. But one thing that goes through my mind and I've mentioned this a couple of times, and one of the things is that we were told that we would have blackouts, energy blackouts. And the thing about that, as I said before, is in a way it would be a silly thing to do, because if your power was turned off and you couldn't use your phone, you couldn't use the internet and all that, you would be made aware how reliant you've been to all these things, and you would suddenly have to become self-reliant. So unless it went off and that's it, and you're in it. But if it was intermittent, you'd start thinking, actually, cash is quite important now if it's only off for a day or two, because you can still buy things in cash. People would still be wanting to trade. So you'd be, there'd be that sense of independence. But if it was off and that's it, then cash goes out the window then, because you can't trade at all. So do you think that?
Yeah, I think they have to balance it out. I think they assess these things on a day-to-day, moment by moment basis, probably with AI. You know what I mean? And they say,
Mm,
is the benefit of getting everyone really scared by taking away their power? How does that balance up against the way that they'll react to that? And they have to choose. I think they'll go for that when they're really going for it. When there's the moment when they think, okay, now we're going to bring in the CBDCs. We need to switch off the power and close the banks for a few days to get them into the right state of mind, and then say, okay, we've come up with a solution. We were going to do this thing in a year, but we can do it now, and you can have all your money back as digital money. And everyone will go, okay, you know.
yeah, it's either that or you lose it.
Yeah, exactly. Or nothing. Or you can just have nothing. It's up to you. So yeah, the thing is, for all my life, I've known since I was about 7, something like this was going on. I kind of worked it out early, and I've kept on the fringes because of that. I haven't had mortgages and got too heavily involved in the system. And they used to be stealthy, so that most people didn't know.
Mm.
Now that's all completely out the window. They're just stomping around like an elephant in a cornfield. You know what I mean? On freedom. You know what I mean? And nobody can stay asleep. It's really hard, isn't it? To stay. The government are okay. I mean, my mum. I say I talk to my mum and I say, years ago I said to her that don't take the vaccine. Unfortunately, she took a couple before she realised. But it took a homeopath to tell her not to take it. Wouldn't listen to me.
Mm.
But everywhere, and even she, it's like, yeah, maybe there is something going on. And she's really reluctant to go there. I think she'd rather see her life out the way it used to be in the model. She doesn't want to see this new model, this revealed evil model.
No, I imagine that a lot of people are quite content. They've got, or their life has been built up around this lie that is there.
Mm.
And, to a certain degree, as long as you pay your taxes and you pay all these bills, even though you're being fleeced, and it's kind of, you don't have to overly think, you don't have to overly challenge it. Yes, you've got to earn enough money, but we've not been in that state for such a long time. Go back to the Victorian era when people were poor and people did have to go for long hours to earn a
And
crust.
children will labour,
And
you
children were,
know.
exactly, they were out there on the fields, or they were in the mills and things like that. And we've got so used to this, what we think sophisticated, cultivated lifestyle, um, which has been very nice, and it will come as a shock if it's just switched over there rather than a slow transition. A slow transition would be so much better than suddenly someone switching a switch and going, right, it's down to you now. Fend for yourself, everyone.
Have you ever heard of this thing called Mousetopia? This
Masstopia, no.
experiment, Mousetopia. So these guys did this experiment where they gave mice everything they needed,
Right.
perfect environment, food, water, and they thought, how will they behave? And what they did was they became woke and they started making little cliques and groups, and they went into they had gay mice and mice that were very aggressive, and no one would go near them, and the whole thing broke down and decimated itself, and they all died. And they did it a few times to check. And I think if you look at the woke kind of thing that's happening, it's kind of like that Mousetopia thing, where the whole thing just collapses and falls apart. Plus, this civilization's about the age that civilizations die, 240 odd years. They pretty much all die.
Mm.
So we're at
And
that switch over time. So it's actually a good thing because it's not a very nice civilization. It's been nice for us, but for most people, it hasn't been that great. We've got to admit that. You know what I mean?
mm.
We've kind of surfed on the shoulders of others who've had to do a lot of work and live harder lives. I think we can have a better world now. I think that with the right consciousness, the technology that we have could be applied in fantastic ways. I'm a kind of technology avoider a little bit. Like here on the farm, we don't use much electricity. As much as we can't use, we don't use.
Yeah.
Just for the hell of it. You know what I mean? Like we let our mushrooms go through the cold in winter, which slows down their growth. Um, but we get better mushrooms because they have this kind of natural cycle. If you control everything and you have perfect conditions and humidity, you get mushrooms, but they haven't really lived. Ours are close to wild. They go through hell. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And the potency is better, and the food and the flavor, everything's better. So we don't rely on technology too much, but I do think that technology is everything that's coming out. AI, it's all possibly fantastically useful, but we need the right people in control. And at the moment, we've got the wrong people in control. We've got the mafia, and what we need is to get rid of them and put good people.
Yeah. It's finding the good people, I suppose.
They're
Um,
there. In Iceland when they had the big crash in 2008. They sacked the Minister of Fisheries. Fishing's a big thing in Iceland, obviously, and they got a fisherman, who'd been fishing for 50 years, and they said, "Can you run the fisheries for now?" And he did a way better job. Eventually the deep state got their claws back in, and it all got corrupted again. But for a little while, they had a people government, and they actually went after the bankers and they arrested them, put them in prison. But
Yeah.
obviously they kept that very quiet because the bankers run everything else, don't they? They run the media, and so they didn't tell us about that. But if you kind of looked, that did happen.
I suppose one consolation is that when things go the wrong way, bankers and people like that, politicians and people like that, they're not very practical people. They wouldn't actually know how to grow a potato or a tomato, or be able to sort of dig for very long in a field to sort of help civilization, and probably nobody will want them near them. So it does seem like some of these politicians may well get the worst brunt of it if things go really bad.
I think there's going to have to be retribution, punishment, accountability, or whatever you want to call it. Um, and not a show trial. Like Nuremberg was a bit of a show trial because all the really bad people all went off to America. You know what I mean? And some of them went off to Argentina. But and they just had this kind of show thing of like a few people that they said, "Oh, you're very bad, and don't do it again." But I actually think, some people say the Nazis won the war, and they just said, "Well, let's pretend we didn't win it and just run it from behind the scenes." And looking at it now, I guess the people behind the Nazis and the Americans won the war. It doesn't really matter who's in control because they run both sides, don't they? So yeah, that's.
You paint a scary picture in some ways for what's happening. Let's hope that there are some people who are also strategists and thinking, right, what can we do when everything goes belly up, when the balloon is up, that they're planning. And if we're able to sort of, as you say, make little plans for ourselves, at least to get us through a few months until bigger organizations and people who've got perhaps a little bit more knowledge of this can slowly pull things together again, because otherwise it does sound like it could be quite bleak.
Well, I'd say prepare for the worst and expect the best. You know what I mean, or whatever, however you want to phrase that. You should at least have an idea that it could get to the very, very worst.
Yeah.
And you should, if you want to survive, you're going to have to maybe face that, possibly. You know what I mean? Small chance of getting to the very worst. It's more likely to get somewhere in the middle where it's very hard to get food, but you can get it, and you're a bit thin, but you can survive.
Well,
Or it might
it
just
would certainly do
mildly
something for
bad.
the obesity problem that we have, wouldn't it?
Well, a lot of the chronic illness that it's all based on metabolism and diabetes. I've got the other book that I sent you, which is about that, which is how to basically hack your metabolism, keep healthy, even though you have a relatively poor lifestyle, rather than try and pretend that you're going to be at the gym every morning. You're not. You know what I mean? Well, most people won't. So here's a way of doing it without that. Solutions. Sorry, I lost the thread of what your last question was there.
Well, I was just saying that the obesity problem will be something else. So, as you say, the other book will help you to sort of make a balanced diet on the basic ingredients. And one thing, I mean, they always say this, that we were we were much healthier during the war when we were rationed, because we were having to eat basic foods rather than all this other nonsense that was pumped as we do these days, the sort of processed foods that has had so much chemicals shoved in them and on them and around them.
Yeah. That's kind of intentional, though. I think big pharma are in the food industry, and it kind of works for them that they make people ill and then get money out of them for treating them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, luckily enough, I've always avoided chemical foods. I've always avoided, additives and stuff. I always look at stuff and think, oh, I don't like the sound of that. It's got too many X's and Y's and weird
Well, again,
letters
I
in
do
it.
think people are slowly waking up to that more and more. I mean, once they've started to say, "Oh, you're going to be eating insects and bugs," people are starting to go, "Hold on a second, that might be okay if they're if I know I'm actually eating them and they're presented in a way that they are luxurious. But if they're just surreptitiously put into foodstuffs and what have you, I mean, some people won't care because they just have no knowledge really of what food is. It's just it's something they have to eat. But I think a lot of people are beginning to think about diet, and I think the pandemic has made people sit up, and perhaps we haven't got enough time for them
It made people
to
sit down and eat too
and
much.
well, yeah, literally, yeah, absolutely.
Sit down while they're sitting up. I
Yeah,
think the big food lies are being exposed now.
yeah,
The seed oils, that's being exposed. The calorie lie, that's being exposed. It's all crap about calories. It's not because your metabolism's like a burner, so you can turn it up and down. So you can put 1 million calories in and turn the burner up, and it's the same as if you put 10 calories in and turned it down. The question is, how do you control the burner? And
yeah,
that's quite easy. It's just I didn't want us to know that. And the simple way to control the burner is there's two systems that run the burner. There's carbohydrates, which is sugars and bread and potatoes, and there's fats. And if you only use one of the burner systems, you will store the other one. So if you're only just constantly putting in food and eating carbs, then the fat, we'll store that for later just in case there's a food shortage or something.
mm,
You know what I mean? And those people that are carrying weight will have that extra little bit of survival um, in that food shortage. They'll last a bit longer because they've got the extra carbs stored away. I mean,
yeah,
the extra energy, so the
yeah,
fats. So it's like a battery. That's what it is. Fat is a battery. You charge it up and you get fatter, and then you discharge it and you get thinner. And the easy way to lose weight is just to fast. Fast
yeah,
every day. Make sure you get long times between your meals. Eat what you want because you can turn the burner up. You know what I mean? But if you fast, you'll burn fat because there's nothing else for your body to do but burn fat or stop.
yes,
So it's all being simplified. The lies are coming out, and now people can take control of their health much more easily. You know what I mean?
mm,
They can balance. They can get their weight up and down. None of that calorie control stuff will ever work because you've got it. It's no good to have. You can have a calorie control. I'll just tell you something they did with mice.
mm,
They got two groups of mice, and they gave them exactly the same food. But one group they gave it all in one go, and the other group they just gave it to them a little bit at a time. And the ones that got it all in one go were much healthier because they had to wait for the next bit of food and they got hungry. And the other ones were just like, oh, I'll eat a little bit and then, I'll have another little bit. And so they never got to use their full metabolism. And, as you know, mice are quite good ways of looking at humans because they have similarities. So yeah, anyway, the lies are coming out and the truth is being revealed. So the information is the key, isn't it? We have more information. We're more
mm,
in control. The only thing that these elites and leaders and secret leaders have over us is that they have more information. They know stuff we don't know. My theory is that this ancient civilization that everyone except a few people tried to deny existed, that built all these pyramids and all these megaliths and stuff, built the whole Amazon basin. It's the whole thing is a circular farm. And they've proven that. It's not an accident. It's literally, they've found all the ways that it was done. And the whole thing is a genius circular farm. Massive. And it supported millions of people, like 30 million people lived in that basin, without doing that much work. Because once you set it up, it kind of grows the food for you.
yeah.
So we need to return to that kind of thinking. That is where we again. I've lost the thread of where we were
No,
going with
no,
that.
but you're quite right. I mean, I'm fascinated by the farming and the old ways of doing farming, and these monoculture ways in which you can see, as we said right at the beginning, the insects have disappeared, the wildlife has disappeared, and you only have to read some of the books from 100 years ago, especially where I am down on the South Downs, and they talk about the variety of different wild flowers, the sponginess of the verdant colour of the grass, and the amazing species of different animals and stoats and hares and things that were just abundantly there, and the people would go out with their shotgun or their snares and would just trap these things because they were pests really, and you had plenty of them.
Yeah,
Now you're hard pushed to find anything.
here it's just full of. They've got their version of stoats. The snakes. There's an unbelievable amount of frogs and crazy amount of beautiful wild birds. You've got crows, slightly different crows, but they're crows. But you've got all these crazy birds with 20-inch feathers on their tails, and little birds smaller than the tip of your thumb. You know what I mean? Tiny
Mm.
little. I just never knew such small birds could even exist. So it's this place is still full of it. You know what I mean? They still put the cow manure on the field, and they don't use that many chemical inputs. The chicken farming here is a bit crap because they're trying to use the modern technology and they're not doing it very well, which is the worst of all worlds.
Right.
If you're going to use modern chicken farming, you have to do it properly, or else you
It's
get a lot of
disastrous.
mortalities, and that's an issue they have here. It's like high chicken mortalities. Um, so it's because they just don't quite manage it properly. But again, they don't have access to. I mean, I can't get all the stuff I'd like to get here. You know what I mean? I
Mm.
mean, we do everything by hand, so we don't use much. We make these medicines, and we literally make them by hand. We extract the tinctures and we leave them for weeks, and then we do all that kind of hand stuff, and we don't use machines, which is kind of expensive, but it's not that expensive because labor here is fairly cheap because the cost of living is low. Um, so yeah, it's actually viable for us to actually do it through labor rather than through machines. And that means we get to employ more people. And we also let them kind of sell the goods to a certain degree so they can make a bit of extra money. So we kind of do a little profit share. Um, and yeah, I think the wildlife here is still going. But if they another 10 years, if they follow that Western model, it'll all be gone again, just like it is there.
Yeah.
So, and it's coming back in the UK, isn't it? You've got all these farmers that are now ecologically aware, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to put some hedgerows in, and I'm going to leave that field fallow for 5 years, and I'm going to put a pond in and swales, and all this kind of stuff." So there is the consciousness there. Unfortunately, the government control is the problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have all
Absolutely.
these rules.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, Freeman. Thank you so much for coming on. We will make your books available, and I know you're in the process of setting up your website, aren't you? But it's not quite ready
If
yet.
it, well, it is. I mean, go and visit it. Yeah, and if you can put a link to it, it's
Mm.
gcityhealth.com.
I
And
think you. Yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah. That's right. I've got it in the email gcityhealth.com, and
yeah.
yeah, and
So that's
that
so
would
we've got these handmade medicines.
have you. Oh, brilliant. Let me just see if I can pull it up so we can just have a quick glance so people can have a quick look. Let's just shove that over here. Hang on, we have to go there. Here we go. Natural wellness. Um, I think this has gone to full screen, so I'm only grabbing part of the screen. But there it is. Yeah, I'll put a link in the description anyway. That would be fantastic. And people can find out more, and we'll make the books
Yeah,
available as well. And hopefully people will read the book and make a bit of a plan, and fingers crossed, we'll
fingers
make it through.
crossed. Just at least get the plan. Even if you don't read the book, just get the plan and just look at the headings. That will give you the starting of a plan.
Yeah,
Even if you don't actually physically do more, do try and get one step ahead because there is something coming, isn't there? We all know this.
yeah. There's something
And
coming, and
yeah,
and
and
just
food looks like it's going to be part of that. So get on top.
get on top. Fantastic, Freeman. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for talking
Likewise.
to us. And look after yourself out there, and maybe
You too. Thank
we'll
you.
we'll join you again. Maybe if we still have the internet in a few
Yeah, well,
months'
I've got some
time.
more books coming, so I've got some more free books coming. So if you want to
Well, it's very
keep
generous
going,
of you to make them free so that people can be prepared.
it's
That's
too important, isn't it? It's
well,
wartime. You know,
absolutely, absolutely,
this knowledge needs to get out, whatever it costs. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I
okay,
hope you've enjoyed this talk. I will be back again with more interviews, lots lined up. But for the moment, from Freeman and myself, thanks for watching and goodbye.